science is a smorgasbord of answers.
Okay, so there's no real way to tack you down on anything. That's why your theory is not falsifiable. That's what makes it's not science.
No, it is. No, it absolutely is. There's lots of ways you can falsify this kind of stuff. There's not really any specific claim about the flood myths in different cultures relevant to any of this to begin with. I mean, besides just the inkling that maybe if there's a bunch of flood myths that there was like a global flood. But if that were true, you would think that the versions of the story would be pretty much homogenous, and they're not. You have vastly different stories. If you go to Africa and you look at the flood myths in Africa, they're very different from the ones in the Middle East, and I have looked at this.
That is easily, well, of course, if I tell you a story, do this sometime. Get 150 people, in a big circle, and just
I know what you're referring to.
Of course it's going to change, okay? You believe that's what you base your whole mentality of the origins of life on. Things change slightly.
Not at all.
No, things change slightly as they progress, correct?
Yes.
Okay, then we agree. Exactly. Stories are nothing like, biological entities, so they are prone to changes like this.
The problem is that some of these flood myths, the fact that they stay so consistent is what is troubling about it to me. If you look at the ones in the Middle East, they're all very, very similar. You just cross a few hundred miles over to Africa, and they're very, very different. And it's because, in anthropological terms, these cultures are separated by non-geological boundaries, and they don't share their information. So what you probably have going on here is some groups of people in the world invented their own flood myths because of local floods or because of some kind of creation myth reason. And some of those cultures were close neighbors with other cultures, and in those little pockets would share their myths, and the other isolated pockets would not share with them, but would share inside themselves. And so you get these co-developments.
We're going to run out of time here. Let me give you another theory to consider. There really was a worldwide flood. Noah kept an accurate record of it. After the flood, these clay tablets of the actual event are handed down from generation to generation. Meanwhile, other people who spread out from this Tower of Babel and after the flood are telling the stories verbally, and things get twisted and converted, changed around. Sometimes it's 2 animals, sometimes it's a boat, sometimes it's a canoe, sometimes it's 8 people, sometimes it's 10 people. And then finally, Moses comes along 1,000 years after this flood, gets these clay tablets, has the original actual story, and codifies it into the book of Genesis. He has the actual account, even though other ones have been written down, like Epic of Gilgamesh, written before that. Doesn't mean he's got the right one. So the similarities are actually because they're all coming from a real event that really happened. I mean, is that even a possibility in your mind, Jared?
It is a possibility, Ken. Now let me ask you a counter question. Okay. If it did happen that there was some kind of local flood, and there was some guy, whether he was called Noah or not is kind of irrelevant, but if something like Noah's flood happened but it's local, would you expect the distribution of the flood myths among the world's cultures to be different than the way that it is right now?
I would expect the distribution of flood myths, just like we see it, because of people living near each other would share similar stories, and the further away they get, the more the story could be twisted.
Okay, then it's the very worst for me. This whole topic is not a piece of evidence for either of our sides.
Well, it's
irrelevant.
We've got eyewitness testimony of this flood, though, which is.
I personally do not accept eyewitness testimony that is that old of any kind.
Okay, that's fine. Let me ask you one more question. If most of these flood myths talk about this flood being preceded by a warning and a time enough to build a boat, if it's a local flood, how on earth would you get warning of a local flood coming? And why would you build a boat? Why not move over the mountain?
That would be evidence of these God, and that's why I think that these stories aren't actually true. Let me go ahead and redefine the term myth, though, like I was trying to explain how I went to TCU and took religion courses from a department that was very anti-Christian, just so you know. And if you want to say that's a problem, there's probably some truth in that. But the term myth does not necessarily imply that it's false. It just means that it's a cultural story that has some kind of significance in terms of the identity of the group. The Judeo-Christian flood myth or creation myth, I can call them myths without indicating that they're false. It's just another term for story used in academic circles, so I'm not trying to deride anything or anybody.
Well, I think in most people's minds it is derogatory. Would you call evolution a myth also by the same logic then?
I think there is an evolutionary myth, that there is a story to evolution that they try to tell in the textbook.
But you would never say, let me explain the evolutionary myth to you.
No, because myth is usually used in the context of religion.
Okay,
because religions mostly provide these kind of stories, and
Well, I think myth fits evolution real good then. That's good.
You can make a religion out of evolution.
Oh, they
that
have.
Mean
Many people have.
Well, I agree with you. I think a lot of people do make a religion out of it, but that doesn't mean that it itself is a religion. And that's the main point that I think that you're way off base on. I think, when I see a car and it has like a Darwin fish on it, that's the kind of person that I'm like, okay, this person is religious in like this evolutionary Darwinistic kind of way. They're obviously fighting the fight. There's those kind of people, and there's scientists who believe in evolution because it's the best scientific theory that we have for the origin of life on Earth. These are different phenomena.
I was just explaining last night, a lot of the really heavy... I went to Barnes & Noble's last night and was looking at a $170 Gray's Anatomy book to buy and add to my collection. And I was looking at a photograph of an embryo. And nowhere in this medical book do they talk about the tail or gill slits on this embryo. And
it's not relevant, right?
Well, it was kind of like what you were just saying. They had stuff in there. They had everything listed on this bill. They had all the arches, named, everything like that. But they never said gill slits here or tail there, nothing like that. It's just, they could care less about treating it like some type of religious fervor, which is Michael Roos talked about.
What he's trying to say is evolution is useless to the medical field.
Evolution is useless to aeronautical engineering.
Correct. It's useless to everything.
No, it's not. It's useless to most things in science. It's like how astronomy is useless to most things in science. Math, higher math,
astronomy
is useless to most things in science. Yeah, sure.
I don't know. You change a few things out there in the galaxies and in the whole universe, and you could start tearing some stuff up here on Earth.
All right.
Yeah, if you change any part of our evolutionary history, you would change who we are too, along the same token.
There is no evolutionary history. It's all myth. You're making the whole thing up. Anyway, I appreciate you calling, Jared. We got to go. We got a lot of folks online.
Okay.
Call in again tomorrow.